Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Energy Gigs webinar. My name is Jason Steer. I'm the CEO of Energy Gigs. I have two esteemed guests joining us today, Sobat Khawaja, the CEO of Provectus, and Brooke Foster, the managing partner or director at Provectus. We are going to get into change management and change management in oil and gas in the next 30 minutes or so. I'll probably give another minute or two for other people to join the call. But while we sort of wait for people to do that, just real quick, if you don't, first time to one of our webinars, we have a webinar every month. It's on all sorts of topics related to energy and the energy industry, as well as working as a consultant or freelancer or getting your next job in the energy sector. We help companies find talent, and we also help individuals find their next role. And our mission is to help companies and people connect and work together. And then for people that are maybe in having a hard time, help them transition into the next areas of career in energy. So without further ado, we will jump into the topic, because there's probably going to be a lot of interesting discussions. If you have questions, please do answer them, ask them in the chat. And then we will ask them of Sobat and Brooke as we go forward. Just quick introduction. Sobat, you're the CEO of Provectus. Can you tell us a little bit about Provectus and what you do and what Provectus does and what change management is broadly?
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having us. And just want to say it's such a pleasure working with Energy Gigs from a talent perspective. So thank you. And thank you for having us. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Sobat Khawaja. As Jason said, I'm the founder and CEO of Provectus. We are a boutique change management consulting firm. We're based here in Houston, but we operate kind of all over the US. Our talent really is folks who have deep consulting sort of experience. They're coming from the Accentures, the Big Fours. And I think what makes us unique is that we bring to market a sort of a blend of design thinking, elements of design thinking, visual design, and kind of bring that together with change management. So we've really got our own approach to change management. It's not kind of like an out of the box sort of like, here's Cotter and here's Proci, let's just implement it. We really sort of have our own perspective, and I think that's been really it's unique. It's really collaborative, and our clients have really been appreciative of it. So hopefully get into more of that as we continue.
No,
the conversation.
That's awesome. And so at a high level, at the 30,000 foot level, what is change management? Is it, because I know there's a book like Who Moved My Cheese, like, and I don't know if that's a change management book but like, if you don't mind, like, what is change management? Like, what does it involve? Like,
yeah. Brooke, did you want to talk to that?
I can talk about that. Thanks, Jason. Hi, team. I'm Brooke Foster. I'm one of the managing directors with Provectus. I've known Sobat since our early days at Accenture, and we've been through here together the last 10 or so years. So it's good, just as Sobat said, just want to iterate, it's so good to work with Energy Gigs and to be here today. But yeah, change management is kind of explaining change management has been a battle that I know Sobat and I have been facing ever since our early days at Accenture, even explaining to our own partners of the importance of change management. And I think now, Sobat and I've had these conversations. I think now it's such a widely used term, and even if people don't understand what it is, like CEOs and CIOs and all the exec officers know that they need it, right? So we think about any type of change that a company goes through, whether it's something as simple as a system implementation, right? They're implementing a new kind of software system, or something as big as they're pivoting their entire operating model. All those changes have a people element, and we think about it, you have to really walk those people through the journey, right? Any type of change that we're doing, it has a future state, and you really have to guide people along the journey. So change management is really that structured approach to helping individuals, teams, companies really move to that current future state, really focused on building that sufficient engagement and communication throughout the entire journey, so that when it comes time for go live, that everyone's aware of what's going on, what their role is, and really make sure those business outcomes are realized as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And I know, I was just reading up on your website, and some of like your unique approach to change is different than a lot of other firms. You have this concept of change by design. So what is that? Can you talk to us a little bit more about that, and how does change by design increase engagement, and how does that help companies and people adapt to
Yeah.
change?
Yeah, no, so change by design, it's really an interdisciplinary approach to change management. So if you think about change management, it can be very academic. It's a discipline. And so you've got templates, you've got methodology, all of that. And I think when you put that in context of a real person and trying to, as Brooke said, influence them and change a mindset or change a behavior, that's probably one of the hardest things to do, is change a behavior, right? And if you're just going to apply methodology and academics to something like that, our experience is that it's not very effective, right? And it's well intentioned, but not as effective as it could be. And so everybody knows that statistic: 7 out of 10 implementations fail. Many times that is due to the people side of things, right? And so what we did is we took best practices from all of these methodologies. You do need a structured approach, right? And so that's important. But what we did is we infused that with visual design thinking. And so really with a focus on the end user and their experience with the content that you're developing. So we want to create, I think many of the people on this call, anybody who's been a consultant, knows the experience of like working on a deck late at night, knowing that like no one's ever this never going to see the light of day. Like no one's really going to ever use this or look at it, right? Like your 20-page PowerPoint, like no one's looking at that, especially now in the time that we're living in, where attention spans are like, they're anatomically shrinking, right? Like we don't have the attention spans that we used to. And, a lot of us are juggling many things. We're working from home. We've got kids around, sick kids. Things are pinging on our phone. So we need content that is going to like get the message across in an interesting, engaging way quickly. And we realized very quickly, and Jason, as you know, because we've worked together in the past, a lot of our early clients were technology clients, right? So they're building products. And so there was very much like this collision between, UX design and change management. And what resulted from that is change by design, where yes, we're taking the best practices of methodology, but we're accelerating all of that with visual design, with design thinking, with content that's really engaging. And so if you think about what that means for a project, you've got the strategic folks like myself, right? Like I'm a consultant. I'm not like a creative person necessarily. So you've got me kind of helping with the business strategy, with the strategic thinking, but then you also have somebody supporting who is a graphic designer, information designer, right? Who can help me then bring my ideas to life. Like, hey, this is the strategy. This is what I'm trying to do. Can you help me? And so what we've become is kind of half management consulting firm, half design agency. Like we're very much a media company now. And so if our client needs training, comms, oftentimes that's in the form of really engaging video content, just depending on their population and what's going to speak to them. Our capabilities are unlimited. Whereas I think in the old model, where it's just consultants, just that strategy sort of piece, you don't have that. You don't have that ability. It's a different skill set, You'll never find kind of a visual designer who's also a change management expert. Like those things are separate. And so what we do is kind of bring that together.
That's awesome. Wow, that's really neat. So then, with thinking about energy and specifically oil and gas, there's constantly boom and bust cycles in the oil and gas space. And pivots to energy transition and pivots back into regular oil and gas because we're not making, not meeting shareholder value or earning the expectations. Like, so from your perspective with the clients that you work with in upstream oil and gas, like what are the common challenges, change challenges that you see with your oil and gas clients?
Yeah, Jason, it's so funny that this webinar is coming at this time because we are just having this conversation about one of the oil and gas clients we're working with now. Really one of their common challenges that you've kind of alluded to is just think about the oil and gas industry. Well, think about all the industries, right? The pace of technology is just, we wake up every day and it's like, oh, ChatGPT is old. Here's the new AI tool, right? And it's kind of like, if you don't use your AI, you're already behind, right? And I think with oil and gas, just given the market volatility over the last however many so years, let's add in ESG, let's add in safety measure, let's add in environment regulations, all the things that oil and gas is faced with, along with, the talent war of, and we were talking to one of our execs at our oil and gas clients and saying, we're fighting with Googles for these brilliant engineers, but they all want to go the Googles or technology, because that's a little more sustainable than oil and gas, right? So there's a lot of challenges with that's oil and gas is facing, and it's really the pace of change. It's keeping up with the pace of change, and how that translates to the people is if a company has to keep up with the pace of change, that means their people have to keep up with the pace of change. And one of the challenges that really where we've seen, and this is not just a plug by Change by Design, but really we've kind of really been able to grow and expand because of our Change by Design methodology, is because it's too much. All the employees are getting inundated with too many, like, okay, you have ESG, you've got safety measures. It's too much, especially when we think about the guys out in the field. They're the ones that's where all the revenue is happening, right? And they're expected to keep up with safety, operations, and all these different things that corporate's throwing at them. And so it's really making sure that you are walking your employees and people through the journey and really helping them tell that succinct story and messaging of why it's important, what's in it for them, and how it connects to the broader picture. So it's really about the challenge that we're seeing is really helping executives to communicate the pace of change story to the rest of the organization and walk them through the journey.
Yeah. And
Wow.
yeah, 100%. And then really just simplifying that discourse for people, right? So that, whatever they're consuming, it's digestible. They want to work with it, right? That their eyes are not glazed over when they're presented with a piece of content. And so I think what we found is that through Change by Design, we're able to really make move the needle with some of this, getting these ideas across in a way that traditional change is just unable to, because of all the things that Brooke mentioned.
Okay, no, that's great. So in terms of staying on that thread of technology, with technology advancements in oil and gas, how is it impacting your clients? How is it impacting your work? What are you seeing?
Yeah, and I mean, I think Brooke can speak to this as well. I think it's in two ways, right? So I think when you think about technology in oil and gas, there's obviously at the front end of it, there's investment that needs to happen, right? And so you've got CIOs, CTOs wanting to do things, wanting to keep momentum, with the pace of change, and so they have to make a case for that to their peers, right, and to the CEO and to their shareholders. And so I think there's a place there for us to play where we can help tell that story, right? We can help tell the narrative of why is the IT organization now more important than ever? Why should we be investing in technology? How is that going to propel us forward? How is that going to help answer some of those questions? And so there's that narrative development that we do kind of on the front end of that. On the back end of that, once you do have the investment, once you do have the technologies and you're starting to roll these things out, I think there's two things. You need to make sure that people are bought in, right? That you're not scaring off your workforce, that they don't feel threatened by this, but they feel like this is kind of, this is a merging of technology and human expertise that's gonna impact my career in a good way, that's gonna upskill me in a good way, and that's gonna benefit the company, right? And if you don't pay attention to that story early on, I think you can create a lot of fear, uncertainty, which is obviously, not a good environment, not a good culture. The second thing is training, right? Upskilling people. So, okay, so we've got these new technologies. What's the new behavior associated with that? So that we're working against best practices. And I think obviously there's that more traditional role of change management, of communicating, training, building all of that content, based on each demographic. So I think it's multifaceted. Right from the very beginning of being able to tell the story of the why, down to, how do you use this technology?
Mm-hmm. And I'm about just to say, pick back on that. I think it's funny. We've been working with a lot of different clients, not just in oil and gas, but, when having conversations, we found that the rest of the organization doesn't really understand the digital journey, digital transformation journey, and not necessarily the why, but the what. I think everyone, when people hear digital transformation, thinks sometimes their eyes glaze over because they're like, we've heard that so many times. What does this mean? What does it actually mean for me? And so as we kind of dug deeper into some of our clients, we found that they understand that technology is the way. That's not where people get hung up on. They want to know how it impacts me. What's that step change process, right? So how is this going to impact me tomorrow? How's it impact me in the future, a year from now, 2 years from now? And I think really what it boiled down to and really got to the root of it was they want to make sure that they're supported throughout that journey and that they have the proper, again, I'm not just doing this for a change management plug, but it really is. Change management was the answer to ensure that, yes, we're not just telling that story Sobat said, but we're also providing them with that change management support of like, here's what the digital journey looks like for you in the field. Here's what the digital journey looks like for you in corporate. And this is how it's going to make your life better, not just today, but tomorrow and a year from now, 2 years from now, etc.
No, that's awesome. I guess at this moment, I just ask and see if there are any questions from the audience. If any participants have any questions that they wanted to ask. If not, I have more questions for you. So, so please do ask questions in the chat, and then we will happily ask Sobat and Brooke. So going on the thread of like the biggest concerns of the clients that you're working with, in oil and gas, like what are you hearing are your sort of top concerns like that you're seeing and you're working on?
I mean, I think talent is a big one, to Brooke's point, both from, the war for talent. Obviously, that's something that we've been seeing for a couple of years now, but then also, people wanting to maybe not move away from oil and gas, wanting to get into, the Googles and, Twitter or X or whatever, moving on to these other sort of platforms away from oil and gas. And so they're really trying to attract and retain the best of the best, right? To do the kind of things that they want to do, right? There's a huge, moral and business sort of imperative on oil and gas to produce more energy and to do so in a responsible way. And that's going to take a lot of brain power and technology, frankly. So the oil and gas companies that are going to be at the forefront are going to be the ones who attract the best talent in that space. And I think that's the big concern that I see is really talent.
And then when you think about like your offering as a consulting firm, like Change by Design, like how are you able to use that to help allay some of those concerns, or how does one go about helping a client?
Because I think for everyone to be bought into the narrative, right? Like of why we're doing this, how we're going to power the world with clean energy responsibly, how this is beyond just your day job, that there's a moral imperative here. I think when people can connect to like the higher reasoning behind something, they're more inclined to want to to want to participate. And so I think just sort of keeping that in mind and knowing that your population is different now. People want to work in places where they feel like they're doing something that's contributing to society, that's fulfilling professionally, that's an environment that they want to be in. If there's a change that they're communicated to in an effective way, that they're brought along on the journey. So I think we certainly help with creating excitement, but then also I think from a retention standpoint, if you've got good change management in place, you're going to have a lot less fear, uncertainty, and those negative sort of emotions that are associated with change.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I feel like every day when we talk to both prospects and also, candidates, whether it's freelancers or job seekers, there is a lot of companies and people that are looking to find other ways of getting involved to make their ESG sort of platform more than just greenwashing, to have it drive down into the organization. I think it seems like there's a real desire to incorporate that into the business as well. So it's adding value financially as well as like on society.
Yeah. And when you are just greenwashing, like we've seen this with companies, like people get called out on that, and that's not a good look, for any company. They get called out on that. Your policies actually did nothing. In fact, they've made things worse. Like we've seen all those articles, right? And so, there's definite financial consequences to not keeping that in mind. And I think people are more aware of that now.
Well, I think so. Just talking through like oil and gas, and now just a broader picture of like what a lot of people call energy transition. So for companies that are thinking about energy transition and changes to like what the work people do, what are strategies that companies and program managers and that they should be considering in terms of helping people navigate the changing sort of larger economic landscape?
I think.
Go ahead, Brooke.
I was going to say, Sobat and I were just talking about this, Jason, last week. Really, it's investing in telling the story. I think Sobat just kind of said it, but we think about kind of the old way of working. It's kind of a, typical executives think of it as like a command, right? Of just like a hierarchical culture of just like, here's the way the company's going, get on board with it, right? ESG is a new way, get on board or leave, right? That's kind of, we can't operate in that old world anymore. And so we really have to engage the hearts and the minds of the employees. And there's this concept that we use with all of our clients that we're doing strategic narrative work is system 1 and system 2 thinking. So system 2 thinking is kind of what we're used to seeing that consultants produce, right? The charts, the graphs, the case for change. It's very, analytical and statistic based, which is good, right? But what that really does is creates cognitive strain of the brain. So when you're looking at this chart, it's like, this is why we have to move to ESG because all these data and these numbers, it creates that cognitive strain, which doesn't lead to that frictionless adoption. So that system 1 thinking is really where that storytelling sits, right? It's that cognitive ease. Think about how you can watch a movie and watching a movie for an hour and a half and you can reiterate the exact plot, all the things. If you told that same kind of movie and more of that data, you wouldn't be able to get the same outcome, right? And really understand really what's going on. And so really what we try to kind of move our clients into is that you've got to start telling stories. And so when it comes to the energy transition, a lot that I've seen, just not even our clients, but other companies, oil and gas companies produce is really around the case for making the case for change factual and statistics, which is good, right? Like the stories are built on solid data. So we want that data, but what we have to do is we have to translate that into a story for our people to make sure that we can really walk people through the journey and again, engage the hearts and minds. And that's really, Sobat and I laugh at this, but that's really a lot of the work that we've been doing is because everyone's so interested in our strategic narrative work because they're like, they know they need that. And again, employee experience, all these buzz terms, what we've heard for so long are now becoming, it's no longer an option. You have to have that employee experience. You have to engage hearts and minds of your employees. And so really investing and telling the story around the energy transition and understanding how this really correlates to the rest of the broader goals of the organization and kind of how that fits into the rest of the change happening in the company really is kind of how you really get people to adopt at the end of the day.
Yeah, and
No.
it's interesting. So our last few clients, like to Brooke's point, that we both have been engaged on, it's been that strategic narrative work. And so it's really us taking their like 90-page strategy deck and turning it into a story, right? Things that people, so a deck that nobody would have looked at, or if they did, their eyes would glaze over, into something that's fun and interesting. And again, it's built on that solid data. It's conveying all the same points, but it's doing it in a way that people want to engage with it. It's a story. And it's interesting. And I think this is the important, difference between Provectus and other firms. That's not necessarily my personal skill set to be able to like turn a 90-page deck into it. I definitely have some thoughts on like key points and salient, things that we want to bring out, but that requires creative skill sets, and I think in the corporate world, oftentimes creative skill sets are overlooked, right? And it's more about like the MBAs and like the, how many years did you, work at this big firm or that big firm? I think what we do at Provectus is that we embrace kind of the creative skill sets, and we bring that together with people who have a lot of business corporate experience, and that is really powerful, right? And so, I think this is kind of the big shift that, that should happen. Maybe it is happening. I know we're doing it. But, if it's just me left to my own devices, like I have a lot of great ideas. I won't be able to execute on them though, because I just don't have that training, And so really our collaborative approach is what makes us so unique. And also it's hard to replicate, right? Because it's introducing people into the workflow that have been left out of the workflow for most of our time in the corporate world. I like working the big firms that I used to work at before Provectus. I never can recall a truly sort of like somebody who's just like a great writer, working with me. And so I think bringing together those skill sets has just been so powerful, both for the consulting folks, but also for the creative skill sets, because they're just like, wow, this is really, it's really fun to build this stuff, to tell these stories. Those are stories they're not necessarily used to telling. And if they do, it's more like in a product context, right? This is not a product. So that's been probably the most rewarding part of building Provectus, is seeing that magic sort of happen where you've got the consultant who has the business context working with like the copywriter, working with the person who's got marketing background, working with the designer to create really just amazing content, And I think that we have to start looking at our output as content, because we are consuming content regularly, whether it's on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter. I'm using all the old terms here. I think it's Meta and X now. And so that's what people expect. They expect content that's interesting. So that's
Well,
what we're
that's great, because I think just thinking about like all of the firms I've worked with, and the candidates and that we brought in, they've very much been like MBA types, right? It hasn't been a UX
Yeah.
designer, hasn't been a writer, it hasn't been, and yeah, I think that probably all showed up in terms of the problems we had on the people side. It was like a pushing rope versus pulling, right? There was no pull in it. And I think it sounds like you create a pull mechanism for your clients.
Yeah. It's funny. I joke with Brooke, like, I mean, nothing against MBAs. We love MBAs, but I always joke with her, like, I'd prefer an MFA over an MBA, like just somebody who's able to think critically and think outside the box and have different life experiences, like all of that. We talk a lot about diversity, like diversity is what, it's not just racial and ethnic diversity. It's diversity of thinking, right? Like looking at things differently, that produces the best outcomes and the strongest outcomes.
Oh, that's great. So we do have a question from one of the attendees. So the question is, organizations that have existed for years, how do those organizations ensure that, how do they make sure that change implementations within their organizations are timely? And in other words, that they don't come along too late and they can't change.
Yeah, that's a great question. Go ahead, Brooke. Go ahead.
I was going to say, no, it's funny. I keep saying it's funny, but we have a term that we use with people of like change management or crisis management. Like you choose what to invest in, like your cost and money's going to go somewhere. And what we've seen is if these companies don't invest in proper change management up front, then what's going to happen is when go live happens, there's going to be rework. You're not going to get the business outcomes that this change set out to realize. And so really it's investing in that change capability, whether that's in-house, building it in-house. I've helped in my Accenture days and post-Accenture days, really helped a lot of companies build that internal change function. It's my joke. That's like what I love doing, my bread and butter. But if you don't have, there's some companies that are small, they don't need an in-house capability. They just outsource that, right? But it's really making sure that you've got proper change management on every project. Not every project, needs a robust 6-person change team, but it does need to have a change capability on the program, really working side by side with the program manager, with the key sponsors, et cetera. So it's really making sure that that investment's placed. And I think that really happens with ensuring that executives and the leadership really understands the importance of change management and the value and really what it is. At a very high 10,000 foot view, they don't need to know the nuts and bolts, but they do need to understand what it values and what it exactly is for a project.
Gotcha. So I know we only have like maybe 2 or 3 minutes left, but I did want to kind of get into like career advice, if you will, for the prospective independent consultants, freelancers, contractors, people, job seekers. So for example, if I wanted to get into change management, like what would be the best place for me to start? Like how does someone become a change professional? It sounds like you were saying that there's also, it's a wider with your offering, and there's other ways to do it besides just being in certified, I guess. That's right.
Yeah, I can offer some thoughts, and then Brooke, if you want to give your perspective. Look, I think there's different ways to get into things. There's not just one way. There are people who just go get a certification, et cetera. That's not necessarily what we look for when we're sort of trying to bring on talent. What matters to me really is experience, right? And so I think that it kind of depends on where you are in your journey. But if you're just starting out your career, it's great to be able to go to a big firm and just get exposure, right? I would never. My experience at Accenture was really formative for me. Like I was exposed to many different clients, to many different industries. I was able to figure out like what I wanted to specialize in, and I got into change. It's kind of like college in a way. So if you're early in your career, I think that's a good way to kind of just, attach yourself to like a big consulting firm. You'll get an education and experience that you might not have the opportunity to get anywhere else, really. I think later in your career is where you start looking to more of these kind of boutiques, kind of like a Provectus, right? Where you can sort of bring, maybe somebody's got a journalism background, or they're really good. They've got really good industry experience, in a certain industry, and they can sort of figure out how they can bring that value to like a Provectus or a smaller firm. And then through that process, also get exposure to projects and start getting exposure to change. This person is more seasoned. And so, hopefully they can pick things up, quickly. And so we've seen people like that who didn't have a traditional change background, who came in to kind of help us with something or be a subject matter expert in a certain area. But then also got to, have all this exposure to change management, right? And they started to build those skills. I think just going and getting a certification, I know like from a resume standpoint, that can mean something. Clients like that, clients like the ProSci or whatever. I think people who really know change, that doesn't really make it like it makes no difference to me whether someone has ProSci or not kind of on their resume. But I'll let Brooke kind of give her thoughts as well.
No, I think you said it perfectly. I think the one thing I've talked to people over the years of just, there's so many different industries and jobs that have so many transferable skills to change management. And so one of our, right after Accenture that I left, I spent time at two Fortune 500 companies really building their internal change capability. And we actually pulled people from different parts of the companies and really trained them up. That was kind of our model because we couldn't find the talent was sparse across the industry. So we really used the kind of like build up and train model and really kind of, took them under our wing, and they had so many transferable skills from their past life and past function that we were able to translate into change management. But yeah, I want to echo what Sobat said. It's the best to start at like a large firm to get that proper seasoning and methodology kind of ingrained.
No, that's awesome. Well, I think we are at time, but I maybe leave another minute here. If anyone has any more questions for Sobat and Brooke, you can ask now. But then I guess more broadly, if anyone on the call, on the webinar wanted to reach out to you, like what's your website address and what's the best way to get in contact with you guys, you gals?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Could we put that in the chat? Maybe?
Yeah.
Our address? Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll send an email out to all the attendees with that information as well.
Perfect. Yeah. So we'll give you like an email address that you can reach out to. Would love to, if somebody's interested in learning more about change, or has a change need, would be happy to talk to them. Okay.
Awesome. Well, Sobat, Brooke, thank you so much for your time. To all the attendees and guests that joined, thank you for attending our lunch webinar. If you have any interest in new topics that you want us to cover, or guests, just shoot us a line. I'm happy to get that in the hopper, if you will. Thanks again. Thank you for joining. We'll look forward to talking to you guys soon. And Sobat and Brooke, thanks again for
Jason. This is fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Always love talking to you.
Same.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Take care.